How does the takeover of Suncorp Bank by ANZ improve banking competition? Economist David Llewellyn-Smith is from MacroBusiness. David Llewellyn-Smith, explain this one to me. How does this improve banking competition, if at all?
G'day, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Well, it doesn't. It does the opposite. I think that's pretty obvious. You're reducing the number of banks in the market. The rationale that was used by the ACCC to initially block the takeover made perfect sense, that it shouldn't go ahead because it reduces competition, and the overturning of it by the Competition Tribunal, which is a gaggle of eminences that sit above the ACCC, is a very under-resourced and opaque group of elite people that have made the wrong decision.
So you do think they've made the wrong decision, David?
Oh, unquestionably.
Well, what's the point of the ACCC, the Australian Competition Consumer Commission, if this little-known Australian Competition Tribunal can overturn the detailed decisions or announcements?
Well, that's really a very pertinent question. You know, the ACCC's got a $30 million budget, immense resources to look into these things, all sorts of power to summon commercial in confidence data and other things that we don't get to look at. And it's made its decision. Now, the tribunal that sits above it are all for checks and balances and what have you in regulation and democracy, etc. But the tribunal that sits above it is severely under-resourced, has no secretariat. It's just a few judges and boffins appointed by the federal government. And they've bought a number of arguments made by ANZ to overturn the decision, all of which look really spurious to me.
My guest is economist David Llewellyn-Smith. He's from MacroBusiness. This is ABC Radio Brisbane. We're talking about the clearing of the way for ANZ to take over Suncorp Bank, although it has to be signed off on by Queensland's Treasurer Cameron Dick, who'll be joining me a little bit later on this morning, but there's no reason to believe that he won't approve the process, given they reached an agreement with the ANZ last year. Also needs to be signed off by Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers, also happens to be a Queenslander by, as fate would have it. How might this affect customers of both banks? It's been put to me that it'll be of benefit to shareholders, but it will disadvantage customers who use particularly Suncorp, but possibly ANZ. What's your view, David Llewellyn-Smith?
Well, to the extent that it reduces competition, everybody will be paying higher fees and higher rates. The principal argument put by the tribunal to overturn the blocking of the merger was actually nothing to do with the merger itself. It was more to do with Macquarie Bank, who have in recent years been making a charge into the mortgage market, and the tribunal declared them a maverick agent within the mortgage market, and therefore, I guess, characterising them as a strong competitive force. I don't understand what Macquarie's doing, trying to capture market share, rationalise reducing competition, which has been freshly introduced by Macquarie. What is the point in having a regulator there to sustain competition, to keep prices as low as they can be for consumers on both fees and rates, if it's simply going to be overturned by elite boffins who have very little resourcing and backing?
The ACCC yesterday, I heard them on news radio, they appeared to be surprised by the decision by the Competition Tribunal.
Well, I'm sure they're shocked by it. I mean, if you look at the cases that the tribunal looks at, it's a procession of Australian monopolies trying to bully the ACCC. So it's Telstra, it's poles and wires, the grids in the electricity network, banks. It's a really big, powerful monopolies, and they go to this tribunal because they've got sort of bottomless pockets to just continue pursuing their economic rents, which they can extract if they don't have to face competition. Now, I don't know what has persuaded the tribunal to overturn the ACCC's decision, but their justification for it makes no sense. I mean, because you've had the introduction of a little extra competition from Macquarie, we should therefore reduce competition. That is their rationale. That's nonsense. You're talking, the difference between 4, 5 or 6 banks in the market. None of that changes the structure of the market. It doesn't turn it from an oligopoly into a highly competitive marketplace. It's still an oligopoly. So, the introduction of Macquarie is terrific in the mortgage market, but you should have allowed the ongoing competition to develop, not let first sniff of it we've had then be undone by one of the big banks gobbling up a small. And that's before we even get to the implications of the decision for the future. So, every major bank now is going to be sniffing around every medium-sized bank, looking to acquire them. And the ACCC will think twice about whether or not to object, because it's got this tribunal sitting on top of it that doesn't really know what it's doing. And even if the ACCC does object, the tribunal has set a precedent that makes it very difficult for it to not overturn all future decisions. So the tribunal looks like it's just let the fox loose in the hen house in terms of banks reducing competition.
My guest is economist David Llewellyn-Smith. He's from MacroBusiness. This is ABC Radio Brisbane. We're talking about apparently the approval of a takeover by ANZ of Suncorp Bank, approval by the Australian Competition Tribunal, after the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission said, no, don't do it, it won't be good. David, it can in theory be stopped by both Queensland's Treasurer, Cameron Dick, who's already made it clear that he supports the deal because he got some jobs out of it for Queensland from the ANZ, and the Federal Treasurer, Jim Chalmers. Should Jim Chalmers, the Federal Treasurer, who would be more responsible for national competition in the banking and financial services sector, should Jim Chalmers say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to sign off on this, I won't approve it?
Well, absolutely he should. We're in the middle of an inflation crisis that's been profit-led by oligopolies. And here we have a glaring case of reduction of competition in a major sector of the economy. At the moment, they're jumping up and down with 6 different inquiries into the supermarket, as one example. Another example is we've got a gas cartel that's rorting the entire East Coast energy network. So, the federal government is doing some things on each of these to help bring down inflation, but nowhere near enough. And I don't think that Jim Chalmers will do anything because he really isn't a very assertive treasurer. He's had many opportunities to attack these competition problems and taken the easy path each time. So I doubt he'll do it. But absolutely he should. He should be looking not just banking but across all of these oligopolies. We have got some inquiries into this, but again, it looks like window dressing rather than serious reform.
Just prior to speaking with you, I played an excerpt from the annual general meeting of the ANZ Bank late last year where they held their AGM here in Brisbane, and there was a discussion about the impact on franking credits. Can you explain that to me? I didn't understand the meaning of the question. Are you able to do that for me, David?
I actually can't.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, it's quite okay. I'm glad it's not just me.
No, it's not just you. We're in great company, Steve.
David Llewellyn-Smith, thanks for your time.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Economist David Llewellyn-Smith is from MacroBusiness.